Expectations are tricky things, and we deal with them every day in the systems we create. Community expectations, religious expectations, and expectations with friends and acquaintances. In a relationship with your spouse, expectations help to reinforce the system your household relies on to conduct its business. You expect that the bills will be paid. You expect that the dog will be walked, and so on. But as a lot of parents know, when you place those same expectations on children who don't have a say in how the system runs, it can lead to problems. So think about those community expectations, religious expectations, and the systems they create. Who had a seat at the table in creating those expectations? And as a result, what consequences do we now live with? Today we're having a conversation with Simon Goettl about how personal, familial, and societal expectations intersect, and how those expectations can contribute to resentment in some cases and to success in others. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Bottomless Coffee. Today we're going to be talking about societal expectation, which I think is really fun for me in a couple of different ways. So the podcast, for people who are interested, is doing well. And along with that come certain expectations from our Patreon community members, from our audience members, and from people out of nowhere who have their thoughts and want to share. And one thing that's important to me, and that was important when I started out, is that I did not place expectations on what we were doing. I wanted to just uplift the people that we were bringing on as guests, and to make sure that people who were leaving the episodes felt empowered and inspired to make a positive change in their immediate influence, right? So we're not syndicating right now. We're not, as I conversed with my guests earlier, we're not in front of a live audience yet, but we're open to all of these different possibilities because we are allowing ourselves to be open to the many possibilities. Now, the flip side of that is expectation. Could be expectations of success, expectations in terms of your profession, who knows? And I think this is an area where a lot of people can relate to having been expected to do something with themselves or their lives, and it can create a real tension and can have a profound impact on your life. And so our guest today is Simon. Oh my gosh, Simon, how do you pronounce your last name?
It's Goettl, so think like kettle, the common household item.
Yes.
Just think that with a G or
Simon Goettl is here, and we are going to talk about societal expectation. Now, if you really want to get in and hear more of Simon, you should check out a podcast that I love. It's called Bop or Flop Podcast. It's at Bop or Flop Podcast on Instagram. And I'm on episode 7. Check that one out. The expectation is that you will love episode 7. Hey, Simon, how are you?
I'm doing really good. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you. So, you chose the topic of societal expectation, and I'm interested. What brought this to your mind? Was it something in that particular moment that came up to you, or?
Well, yeah, I think it's a really interesting topic because it's something that will be placed on you, whether you are aware of it or not, from probably the time you're born till the time you die.
Yeah.
And I thought it would be a really interesting topic to examine not only like general societal expectations, but how you, other people, what our relationship to them is, and does that change for me as someone who identifies as gay, like how does that shape,
Mm-hmm.
a general societal expectation? How does that like change or modify based on how I identify? That kind of thing.
So I will admit that the topic forced me into a period of introspection when I thought, okay, well, what expectations did I realize had been placed on me, and during what part of my life were
Hmm.
certain expectations there, and how did they bring me to where I am today, right? And so from my earliest memories of expectation, I think this is probably common. That came from my parents, I think. At least, like, in an articulated sense, it was,
100%.
yeah, you're going to grow up, you're going to go to college. At
Hmm.
18, you will not be living in this house, and then you will have found your own way in the world. Which, compared to some people's stories, might not be that bad.
Right. Right.
Right.
100%. Yeah.
Did you have like parental expectations put on you?
Definitely. The earliest that I can remember started with religious, religious
Mm.
related expectations set by my parents, and then for sure academic. So those two
So what's
definitely went
your
hand in hand.
what's your religion, or what was it, was or is?
As it was,
Okay.
I did grow up Catholic, and I think you could really unpack an entire episode just around what it means to be Catholic, and
Mm-hmm.
it's a very image-based culture, I would
Hmm.
say. And so we were at church every week, every weekend. And for some
Mass,
Catholic
right?
people, Mass, yes,
Yeah.
thank you. And there's Catholicism, yes, is the one where there's a lot of sitting
And
into
standing
standing,
and
into
wine.
kneeling, and wine. Not good wine, but it's there. um, so there was just we're going to be at mass every weekend. I remember like walking into church every Sunday, and like we'd be walking closer and closer to the front, and we were a large Catholic family.
Mm.
I'm the youngest child of 5 kids. I have 4 older sisters, so a lot of it, both as I was growing up and looking back on it now, felt so not performative, because I know my parents are very, very devout in their beliefs and genuine, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But I think so much of it, maybe they don't even realize, is there is a lot of expectation placed on how you are perceived in that culture, I think.
So,
So, yeah.
I do want, because my husband, is Catholic, which
He
is
is. I
a
love that.
statement that you
Hmm.
probably would not have heard coming out of the mouth of a man, like 20 years ago, right?
Right,
From 20
right,
years ago to the beginning of Catholicism, you would not have heard that statement. And
right.
I think you really are onto something when you articulate that intersection of sexuality and religion and
Yes,
expectation.
yes.
Um, Particularly recently, I feel as though that expectation is what led some religions to kind of grow and change and evolve,
Hmm.
because uh, society at that point expected religion to not be so confining and restrictive on people who are trying to live and love who they want.
Right.
And so I think we probably could do a whole podcast on that. As a
Probably
matter
could.
of
You
fact.
probably could. Yep, yep.
So
True.
with your family, you think it was primarily religion, where the expectation was.
Definitely the earliest. I would say just as strong as the religious aspect was, there was definitely academic expectations in my
Mm.
family. It was very similar, it sounds like, to you, where you're going to go to school, you're going to do very well in your classes, and you're going to go to college, and then go from there. Yeah.
Do you feel like you lived up to those expectations, or where did the tension come for you, after you had already lived up to those particular academic expectations or before?
I would say, like, looking at where I'm at now, yes, I succeeded. I mean, I have a stable job. I'm happy with where I'm at, but it was such a fraught and like traumatic
Oh,
experience
really?
along the way to get there because I think inherently I'm a bit of a perfectionist.
Hmm.
So I already have a lot of criticism that comes from myself to do well and to perform at a high level.
Hmm.
And then you have that outside influence of you're the youngest of four, you have four older sisters who, in my opinion, are very successful in their own way. And
Mm-hmm.
then you have your parents saying, well, you're going to get good grades.
Right.
Period. That's just how it is because that's how we do things. And so those layers of expectation really, really, I just felt that all of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if this is a Catholic thing or like a German thing because I'm like primarily of like German Czech background, but
Okay.
the idea of self-compassion wasn't something that we actively talked about.
Yeah.
It just wasn't a thing. I didn't learn about that as a concept until I was probably 24 or 25 years old, and it like blew my mind that you're supposed to be kind to yourself. um, and so,
Surprise.
exactly. And so I think just all of those things combined to, for someone who's growing up in the US school system, it really just makes a lot of your issues seem huge, like
Hmm.
life changing. And it just really doesn't need to be that way.
I agree with you. And as you're speaking, I'm kind of imagining this model where maybe we don't let kids tell us, necessarily what they want to do with their whole lives from the age of 5 on, but we at least give people the room to breathe and explore, and we don't set these finite constraints on them or impose these harsh, really, frankly, traumatic penalties on them. Um,
Yeah.
so, by way of example, at the intersection of religion, sexuality, and expectation, I lived in Atlanta for a long time, and I had this really fun house where people were, I don't know, welcome to come and go and stay or what have you. But
Yeah.
on occasion, there would be people who were forced out of their home, and this is common in the gay community.
Yes.
Kicked out of their home for one reason or another, and in one particular case, um, there was an element of Mormonism involved, and I don't
Yeah.
remember if they were excommunicated from the church or what have you. But it was just like, why would you stick with an organization that would so emotionally and physically separate you from your son because of the way your son wants to live his life?
Yeah.
And so those expectations can be really horrible for individuals, for family, and for the society that's imposing those
Yeah.
expectations.
And that is a really interesting point because I do think not only just religious, but just when you form so much of your identity around one thing, like in this
Mm-hmm.
case, Mormonism,
Mm-hmm.
it becomes very challenging to objectively look outside of yourself when you're faced with a situation like I'm a Mormon parent and my son or daughter is telling me like I'm gay and I don't know how to reconcile this with my 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 religious
Yeah.
ideals and all of that. Yeah, I personally can't even like imagine the mental gymnastics you'd have to do
Mm-hmm.
to validate both in your mind, which is probably why religion hasn't played a large role in my adult life.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, that is a very interesting topic
Well, let
for
me
sure.
ask you,
Hmm.
getting back to your personal journey,
Sure.
excuse me, your personal journey and expectations. When did you become cognizant of the expectations that were put on you? And did you like immediately kind of rebuke those expectations and go your own way, or was it more of a
Yeah.
process?
I'm not like a super confrontational person by
Hmm.
nature. I'm super observant, and for better or for worse, I think I'm just a little more aware than your average human being,
Yeah.
which can be really great, and sometimes it's just like a little too much emotionally.
Okay.
So I think I noticed very early on just expectation in general, and instead of having making that have us me take a strong stance of like I'm gonna go with this or I'm not, I just kind of let it happen to me, and I just wanted to observe and better understand how that made me feel.
Hmm.
And so it really wasn't like when you talk about like the academic of it all, the academic expectations mixed with the religious expectations, for me, it really came to a head when I was in high school, and I just spent so long observing and
Mm-hmm.
internalizing to where I just got to a point where I couldn't handle it, and I had like a mental break. And
Oh, okay.
yeah, and so I went through a whole journey in terms of like major depression and anxiety that I think majorly in part were linked to my relationship to these expectations.
So recently, and as of this conversation, you wouldn't have even had the opportunity to hear it yet, but we had a conversation with someone about resilience.
Hmm.
And at those young ages, from from our conversation as two people on a podcast, right?
Hmm. Yep.
We observed that in those early stages, resilience just looks like survival, like just
100%.
yeah.
Li- yeah, like literally you said that word and it instantly put me back in that spot of just like I just need to survive this. And
Yes.
that was it.
Yep.
Yeah.
But at when you start gaining a measure of independence, because again, at around the high school level, society kind of expects you to be a little bit more independent. Things can go in different ways, and
Right.
so it sounds like for you something. I don't know if trauma is the right word, but
Hmm.
something sent you into a place of depression where you weren't able to thrive in that
Yeah.
moment.
Hmm.
So what was like how did you get through it? You know?
Yeah, well, I think just for some contextual background,
Please.
again, with I don't know if it is a Catholicism thing or just a my family thing, but we didn't talk about mental illness at
Mm.
all.
Oh,
Again,
black people don't talk about mental illness
yeah,
either. Yeah.
black people too, like great. What a fun thing to have in common. Like, but that was totally, I just thought, because now looking back, I can remember vividly times in my life where I was just so sad and I had no
mm.
idea why that was. And so to have to have someone like later on tell me what that was, it was just like such a relief to understand that, oh, this
Yeah.
isn't something that everyone goes through on a day-to-day basis. But
Yeah.
I think I forgot the question.
It's we were you were taking us through your how you got through the depression, not
Yes,
necessarily like dwelling in
sure,
the depths of it, but at some point you came at least out of it a little bit,
sure.
and found a way through resilience to go on.
Yeah, so like when I hit that point, I knew that I wasn't in a place to do it myself. So I had taken um like we'll just say a screed of like negative thoughts and emotions I had written
Mm-hmm.
about myself in a journal, and I had taken it directly to my school nurse just because like while my thought process was all over the place and I had real no idea what was happening just at a neurological level, I knew that I
Yeah.
couldn't do it.
Yeah.
I couldn't go through it on my own. So I just was like, okay, I need to bring in a professional,
You sought
take
help.
this. Yes,
Yeah.
I just knew like it was necessary if I wanted to continue on.
Yeah.
So from there, I think just like generally speaking, I learned so much about myself. I learned so much about what my relationship with expectation was doing to me.
Mm-hmm.
I learned more about just like, I guess life in general is kind of a question of how do you find happiness and success, and what is that definition even?
Yeah.
So I think from there I just started to work on myself a lot more in terms of those questions. And I think there's a general foundation now of openness and empathy and conversation that I've adapted into
Yeah.
my everyday. And that's really, I mean, once you're open to exploring things and talking about things, it like a lot just kind of tends to work itself out, I think.
I think you hit on something really interesting there that I don't want to gloss over.
Hmm.
It sounds as though you weren't in a headspace immediately before seeking help where you knew exactly what you were doing, but you were
Yeah,
like, I need to take this to somebody.
100%.
And if
Yeah.
anyone is listening or watching and you are resonating with some of what Simon is describing from those darkest moments, it is really important that you seek help. And
Yes.
if your family, it's not who you go to, because in Simon's case, in this instinctual moment, he knew that his family was not the right place to take this journal to.
Hmm.
Find a professional, find a friend, find anybody.
Yeah.
Because I think you'll find, like Simon was saying, that a lot of people have been through what he has already been through and what you might be going through now, and come out of it as empathetic and communicative and very open to receiving and kind of listening for opportunities to help.
Right.
Oh,
Yes, I
okay,
think that
good.
is super important. Thanks for touching on that.
Oh, it's no problem. I said right at the end, and I was like, I hope that's right. Well, let's take a super quick coffee break, and we'll be
All
right back
right.
with Simon. Yeah.
All right.
Okay, everybody, we are back with Simon Goettl at The Realist Simon on Instagram and a co host of Bop or Flop podcast. Once again, episode 7 is the best episode. Woo!
Absolutely. And just a disclaimer for anyone who like loves the structure and the preparation that goes into this podcast. Our podcast is a little different. Sometimes sometimes the outline is very minimal and we encourage all sorts of nonsense. Sometimes there's a special cookie involved and you really never know where it's going to go. So if that's not your thing, maybe stick to this podcast. But there's something for everyone. You
But I will say, it is almost distractingly funny sometimes. The last one, I'm a couple of episodes behind, but you were at the tail end. You were reviewing that music movie with
Oh
Sia, and
God,
your
yes.
descriptions of the plot were so great. And so, a couple of weeks later, I was really surprised. Like, I literally raised an eyebrow when it was nominated for a Golden Globe or something.
Okay, look, the Golden Globes are a complete joke. That shit doesn't matter. I, Kate Hudson was nominated as like
Yeah.
best actress for that, and truly, it's one of her most unhinged, horrible performances I've ever seen. Whatever.
Okay.
Golden Globes.
The Golden
Nonsense.
Globes. I feel as though society expects more from the Golden
Yeah,
Globes.
yeah, they should. They really should.
So before the break, we were really talking about your past experiences with societal expectation, and let's talk about the now.
Yeah.
What what is your relationship with those expectations? Do you How do you manage the expectations that are put on you? Are you like actively
Oh
screening for
God,
them
yeah.
at all times? Like, what does that look like for you?
Yeah, I just think across the board, I take things a lot less seriously than I
Mm,
used to. And that's not to say that I don't take anything seriously, but when I look back on stuff, I just think I like when you really look at an issue you're having and something that's giving you negative emotions, just think about like what is the problem here and is it really that big of a deal and something that I want to devote this much energy to? Because I think
Yeah.
past Simon would have really benefited from that advice, and maybe it just had an easier time.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Sure.
Yeah, yeah. So like, one thing in particular I think of a lot, and like, just because it, look at the Catholic structure, right? Okay, so
Hmm.
my parents have 5 children.
Yeah.
The goal, I assume, I've never had this conversation with them, but I assume is that you reproduce and you have more Catholic babies.
Yes.
They didn't really succeed on that front, and I feel bad about it. Like none of us are Catholic, sorry.
Oh, okay.
But but that was something that I was definitely cognizant of at the time, was like I'm expected to get married and have babies. And
Yeah.
I just gotta say, like, gays aren't the only people with problems. I'm honestly very happy I'm not straight, because I think that is a real societal expectation that you just get married and you have kids. And that is crazy to me.
It is. I
It
agree. I
is.
agree.
Not everyone should be having children. Not I don't think everyone is even going to be happy in marriage. I don't think that should be your end goal. So like I truly don't feel those expectations, and like
Hmm.
bless my parents, they just want me to be happy, and truly when I came out and they processed that and did whatever they needed to do, any sort of like expectation on their end, I totally felt it fly away from me,
Oh, wow.
because they just know how to process it in terms of Simon's happy with his life, and that's it. They're not like, so when are you gonna get married and adopt? That's not even there.
Yeah.
So to think of like the reality that I would have if I were straight, I don't even wanna go there. I don't want that.
So it was liberating for you
Yes.
and for your
Yes.
parents when you started like sharing your authentic self with the people who had
Yes.
these expectations.
100%. Like I just feel so much lighter as a person
Yeah.
now.
And I
Yeah.
think we should also mention that your parents had expectations put upon them as well.
Yes, we should definitely acknowledge, like, we're really just working based on what we've learned in life and what our own experiences
Yeah.
have been. So in their eyes, I'm sure that is like their the ultimate goal for them, and the most like noble existence that
Mhm.
they know of. So I don't fault them at all. I think and now we have a very good relationship that works for us, based, and it respects, just our expectations of ourselves and our lives, I guess.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. Yeah.
Oh, that's really wonderful because
Yeah.
if there are parents listening, just try to be cognizant of the expectations that you have upon yourself that are trickling down.
Yeah.
Um, I wonder, Simon, if you'd want to go through kind of an exercise. Maybe we can kind of look at,
Sure.
different stages of different constructs that might be imposing expectations on you now, and whether or
Okay.
not you deal with them. So, like work, you mentioned that you have a job.
I do.
I think it's
Yes.
kind of corporate.
Yes.
Do you feel as though what expectations do you feel like are being put upon you from your job? Like obviously they expect you to
Man.
show up, but
Yeah, base level, they expect me to show up. As a quote unquote like senior member of the team too, there are like additional responsibilities,
mm,
and I feel very lucky that I have a boss who very much is in tune of what my skill set is and provides me with opportunities that align with that. So
that's good.
like I have taken up a lot of responsibilities with our team in terms of like organizing morning coffee and chat kind of things,
Oh,
and
nice.
just like connecting the team
I
during this.
love coffee and chat, Simon.
Exactly. Isn't it the best? And so like I've been able to, creatively problem solve and find ways to keep people's mental health at a good place
Nice.
during a really, really weird time where, I mean, our company has been working from home since,
Mm-hmm.
last year, and
Mm-hmm.
don't see that changing anytime soon.
Do you
Yeah.
think that given your past experience with mental health, that you are particularly well equipped for this time when so many people are facing mental health challenges, and you're in a position when you can really look for that, like via Zoom, and just make sure that
Yeah.
everyone is okay?
110,000%. Yes.
Wow.
I think my experiences make me a great candidate for that. And it's not just that. I think like on a base level, as a human being, I don't know why, but I do feel a connection to humanity in general,
Hmm.
and I think just that base belief lends itself to being someone who gives a shit
Yeah, yeah.
about other people. Um, yeah, that is a whole other topic of like human nature. Are people good inherently? Are they evil inherently? Like that
Yeah.
whole thing, fascinating. But yeah,
That's
yeah,
so funny. So your partner on Bop or Flop podcast is Aaron
yes,
Minkema, who was our guest for episode 3,
yes, he
and
was.
it was an aha moment for him to realize that caring about other people is something you should do.
I just
it
want to, I just want to point out, I love Erin so much.
Yeah.
That queen is always right in her reality, but we will always have the fact that she was a Republican.
Yes. And then a libertarian.
And then a libertarian. Just say it. Love you, girl. Love you so much.
Yes. But you know what? That billionaire tears mug.
That's right.
That
That's
is
right.
right.
Yeah, and look at him now. He's such
Hmm.
an advocate. He's out there and connecting people. I mean, if I hadn't met Aaron, I wouldn't have joined this like kickball league that I did in the cities.
Oh,
And like I literally owe a lot of my my relationship to the gay community and my friends to Aaron because he brought me in and connected me. So
oh, that's wonderful. He is
we
an
love Aaron.
incredibly inclusive person.
That's true.
Um, and let's go there because we talked about work and the expectations that may or may not be put on there. I actually think, just as a quick aside, that checking on people's mental health via Zoom sounds more like an expectation that you put on yourself than one that
Yeah.
came from the job, but it's something you bring to it.
Yeah. I guess it is probably something I put myself
But it's
through
wonderful
that
as a
happens
human.
to be in a work setting. Yeah,
Right, as a human who has this job, this is what I'm going to do.
sure.
Now, as a member of the LGBTQIA plus community, do you feel expectations from the community in one way or another, good or bad?
Oh God, that is such a oh my God.
Yeah, I warmed you up with the corporate one.
Jesus, where to begin?
I would begin with brunch. I would begin
Right,
with.
you have to brunch weekly,
Yes.
or else your card is revoked.
Mm-hmm.
Um, okay, I'll just jump in on the first thing I can think of.
Yeah.
I think that sometimes our community puts on a performance of inclusion and being
Oh.
all about that, but remains very comfortable within their own bubble or their clique or whatever it may be, and maybe plays up that they're inclusive more than they actually are. So I think that is something, if you're in the gay community, to just be cognizant of. Are we
Yeah.
really being inclusive of everyone, or are we
Hmm.
just saying we are? Are we posting things on social media about diversity and anti-racism, or are we actually taking those lessons and doing something with it? You know, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I think that can also extend to I think there are physical expectations in the gay community, which,
Mm-hmm.
oh boy,
Very
are
problematic. Very problematic.
really problematic and honestly crippling. If you feel that too, get off of Instagram. Do not hit your explore page because if you like one picture of a hot Instagram model, that algorithm is
Yeah.
built to further validate that click, and your explore page is just going to become hot ass people with unattainable bodies.
Yeah.
Don't do it.
Don't do
Don't do
it.
it. Don't fucking do it. It's a lot. That being said, I do think there are some positive. I get into the negative very quickly
It's
because
okay. I'll bring
I
you out.
feel
Don't worry.
I just like I feel that very heavily, and I personally just like I think humans have a tendency to sit in the comfortable, and I'm very aware of that. And so when I feel the negative and I feel there can be improvement, I just, for whatever reason, that sits with me a little more because I just don't want people to forget it.
When I think
Yes.
about the gay community and our whatever our culture is and the expectations therein, I do also think that we can do better. As a relatively young community, we get to shape our values,
Yes.
and I'm like, why would we pick these values when we have so many that we can choose from?
Yep. Yep. Uh-huh. That's
uh,
so true.
and so I almost think that the kind of the weight of the expectations from the gay community are less oppressive and lead to less like of the traumatic experience because
Sure.
they're so unimportant and they're so like
That that is such an interesting. Yes.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's a great way. I just think mentally, that's a great way to frame really anything is like,
Mm.
is this important?
Yes,
Like,
yes.
truly, like, is this something I need to be dedicating this much energy to? 100%. Agreed.
Agreed. Agreed.
Mhm.
Okay, and then we've talked. Okay, so we've talked about the gay community. We've talked about corporate work, and I think we also mentioned your family in contemporary context, and everything is
Mhm.
good. Are we
Yep.
missing any aspects of your life? Your cat Moira have
Sh-
expectations.
Moira has expectations that I drop everything and play with her, no matter the time or day, no matter if I'm on a Zoom call. She doesn't know how good she has it, guys. Sh She's a downtown city kitty. She's got a great life.
Now, so stepping away from your personal uh, expectations and your experience,
Hmm.
have you ever, like, when you're with friends or you had older sisters, maybe if you had a younger sister, have you ever had conversations with someone about like kind of opening them up or making them aware of these expectations that they're kind of laboring under and how they need to just kind of
Hmm.
push those off to the side?
That's a really good question. Maybe more indirectly.
Sure.
'Cause yeah, I don't know if I've ever. Maybe I just haven't met anyone who's like as hard on themselves as I am. But yeah, generally when I've been, talking to friends who are going through things, I
Hmm.
haven't really framed it as like an expectation thing. And I'm having like a real moment here of like, oh, that seems so obvious. Like,
Oh, no way. It
why did
never.
why did I not think of that before? I'm really having like a, oh,
Oh, good. You're
yeah.
having a bottomless coffee aha moment.
Yeah, absolutely. But no, I think that's definitely something to think about moving forward. Like, if you have a friend who's going through something,
Yeah.
yeah, frame it as like is this an expectation thing that is being put on them or they're putting on themselves? And
Yeah.
how can you like navigate it that way? That's such, oh, yes, love.
Just
Love.
just to be clear, even though I asked you that question, I have also never asked a friend a friend something similar. So you are sharing a moment with me.
Right. But I do think it is probably something that has come up indirectly
Yeah.
where it wasn't where I was at mentally in terms of how I was thinking about it, but it just kind of related naturally, I guess. Yeah. Huh.
Huh.
I'm gonna be thinking about that a lot this morning, I think.
Good. Well, let's let that one percolate. 'Cause
Yeah.
that's good. That's
Great
good.
word,
That could be your
percolate,
takeaway.
GRE. We love that.
Well, you know what? I want to make sure that we devote a good amount of time talking about the positive,
Yes.
As a reminder, we do want people to leave feeling inspired and empowered. And I think there's so much that people can already take away
Mhm.
from this episode because you've been an amazing guest. Thank
Oh
you,
wow, thank you.
Simon, at the realist Simon on Instagram. But what are some positive societal expectations? Because I know it
Sure,
can be,
sure.
like you mentioned, it can be easy to go negative. You
Yeah,
mentioned that
yeah.
earlier, but I don't know why it's so much more difficult to go positive. You have to be really
It's
intentional about it.
you do. That is crazy. Yeah. But I do think there are pretty obvious examples of this.
Mm-hmm.
Just I think there are societal expectations that exist so that we function as a
Hmm.
society. You're kind of expected to go to school as
Mm-hmm.
someone growing up. You're expected to get an education for the most part. From there, you're generally expected to provide for yourself or your family or whatever your structure is. So that involves, going to work
Mm-hmm.
and producing something that adds to society, which I mean you could argue that on an individual basis depending on what you're doing
Yeah.
over and over. I mean, you could argue I work in financial services, so like what am I really doing besides making rich people more rich? I mean, we could get into that, but
You're skewing negative. You're
I
skewing
know I'm
negative.
skewing negative. It's so easy. It's so easy. And I do think like the best example of this would be like the golden rule you
Oh,
learn
that's
as a
nice.
child, like
Yeah.
treat others as you would want to be treated. I think that's probably the most important one I can think of.
I think I get a lot of positive societal expectations from younger people uh,
Yes.
lately. I'm like, oh my gosh, like I'm supposed to be the cool, like older person, but you really deserve the attention and to have your voices amplified. So, like environmentalism, for
Yes.
instance, I did not recognize as being uh, an expectation when I was younger. That is more of an expectation now.
I
Like,
love that.
yeah, like you are expected to stop messing up the planet Earth that we all live on.
That makes me feel good. That
Right?
like
Me too.
I really hope that that is a thing with young
Yeah.
people because old people, those people who are almost off this planet, they're not going to change. They're jaded. They've been through the ringer, and like kids, like young kids haven't had life hit them that way where
Hmm.
like they're so idealistic, and I love that so much. Like anything truly is possible.
And I almost wonder if maybe they didn't, or maybe we didn't at some point, labor under the expectation of consumerism
Hmm.
in a way that was rejected by some younger people. And now um, that rejection is having really positive benefits for the planet.
Oh, I
Uh,
hope so.
I hope so. You mentioned anti racism before,
Hmm.
and it's really topical. Like the episode right after yours is going to be dedicated exclusively to that subject. And
Nice.
um, I it's one of those things where even as a black man, I was like, yeah, racial equity, just don't be racist. And now the kids are like, okay, that's great, but
Like, actually, have you tried this?
like if you see racism, shut it down.
Yep, yep.
And I'm like,
Yeah,
what a positive expectation.
yeah.
And I
I love
think
that.
it's like you said, oh, that makes me feel so good to
Yeah.
have that expectation, as opposed to the ones that we were talking about earlier
Uh-huh,
that
uh-huh.
send you to a dark place.
Totally.
Yeah, so I loved it.
That's so good. Like, I'm not a kid person at all. Like,
Mhm.
I don't know how to talk to kids. I don't understand them. But I am so envious. I'm envious of two things.
Okay.
I'm envious of like how kids from like ages 1 to 3 are linguistic sponges and can learn 8 languages and not
Hmm.
blink an eye. Whatever.
Come on,
Screw you guys.
polyglots. Yeah.
Screw you kids. And the other is just that like the idealism. Like I am so envious that they can access that so easily.
Yeah.
I love that about kids. It's so cool.
Same. I hope I don't. So my demographics, my analytics don't break it down by age, but I hope that some younger people are listening and that they feel inspired to keep doing what they're doing because it's really wonderful work.
Agreed. We need you.
We need you. Help us help you.
So true.
Well, yay, Simon! This has been really wonderful. I'm glad that we are ending on a positive note. If someone is listening and they want to support you or an organization or something that you support, what would you suggest that they do?
I don't have any like particular organizations in mind, but I did want to share a quote that I remember reading this quote in a gym that I used to go to.
Okay.
And it really has resonated with me. I'll never forget this quote. It's from George Eliot, and the quote is, "What do we live for if not to make life less difficult for each other?" I get really emotional when I read that quote. I think if everyone operated in that mindset, we'd live in a much better place. And I like the fact that George Eliot is actually a woman. Yeah.
Nice.
So they're a novelist from the mid 1800s who went under the pseudonym George Eliot. So
very cool. Huh. Thank you, Simon. Read that one more time.
Yes. Okay. So, what do we live for if not to make life less difficult for each other?
Amen.
That's not great.
Thank you so much, Simon. I really appreciate you coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. I had a really great time, and I really appreciate what you do at the podcast.
Oh, thanks. Mm-hmm. Bye, everybody. Thank you for joining the conversation today. If you would like exclusive access to live streams of these conversations and to a community of people to converse with on topics like the ones that we discussed today, then join our Patreon community at patreon.com/bottomlesscoffee. Our website is bottomlesscoffeepodcast.com. Bottomless Coffee Podcast is produced by me, Jerome Evans, on social media everywhere as @JeromeTEvans. Our Patreon producers are listed in the episode description. You can connect with the podcast on Instagram at Bottomless Coffee Podcast. Our music is by Noir et Blanc V and God Mode. Thanks all, and I'll see you next time.